Welcome to New North, a podcast where we interview great people redefining life after 50, who have perfected the art and science of successful longevity. We dive deep to find out their methods and experiences that have helped them find their new north.
Welcome to New North. Santanu is finally happening. We've been wanting to do this podcast for a long time now, and now the time has come. Okay. Well, before kind of formally starting it, let me introduce you to the audience. So here is my great friend Santanu Paul, who wore several hats in the past, like being a technocrat, being an entrepreneur, a cultural ambassador, and a gastronome. A brilliant mind, a man of letters and thought. It's fantastic to collaborate with you, Santanu, on this project on New North.
Thank you so much, Vasu. I think those are very kind words, and I too welcome the audience to the New North. But Vasu, before I think I get going, I should also reciprocate by saying some important and good things about you. Professor Vasudeva Varma, my collaborator here, co-host of New North. Vasu, as we call him, has been a great friend, and he's been the Dean of IIIT Hyderabad, and an eminent professor of computer science, and his research track record has been outstanding. And I think one of the key themes of his research has been that he has been evolving with the times, starting from software engineering, I think 20 years ago, to moving on to information retrieval, then semantic search, summarization, building abstracts, automated versions, and then also eventually social media analytics. So clearly, impact, trying to make a difference to society has been a big part of his research, and I think that's something I really respect. And the gastronome part, of course, is goes for the territory, because both of us have this habit of going for dinners and lunches, and I suspect we are showing that in our current state of physique. Lunches. Yeah, we haven't missed too many lunches and dinners, that's for sure. But anyway, it's wonderful to be here, and I think it's probably appropriate if I tell the audience a little bit about what New North is about. Right. The New North, of course, is a podcast. It's about happy longevity. What does that mean? As we know, that medical science has made it possible for people to live longer. But living longer does not mean people are always living longer with more productivity or more health or more happiness. So in some sense, we know in our lives so many people who are doing incredible things in their 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s. So the goal of this podcast is to work together to interview great people who have been successfully aging in a very productive and happy manner, and try to figure out from that what exactly is the secret of their success. So we are trying to essentially uncover the art and science of successful longevity. That's our purpose in New North. To that extent, in this podcast, we will interview some outstanding people, people that all of you would, I'm sure, love to hear from. These are all legendary or very interesting people who have done this. And through that, we will try to figure out how they have pulled it off, right? So a couple of quick stories that come in mind. I mean, I have, I think most people who know me know that I read way too much for my own good. But one of the things I remember reading 25 years ago was a book on the sense of what Greek philosophers believe is the meaning of happiness. Right. Turns out the Greeks believed that happiness is like a three-legged stool, and the three legs are the three P's. P for purpose, P for prosperity, P for peace. Now, purpose is something that makes people happy. When they have a situation where they think their life has purpose, even if they're getting older, I'm sure, that adds happiness. But that is not enough by itself. You need a second leg, and that's prosperity. So you need at least to be not starving on the street, right? You need basic material well-being to be happy. But if you have money but no purpose, that doesn't work. If you have purpose but no money, that also doesn't work. The third P, of the third leg of the stool, is peace, which means that a certain sort of calmness, a tranquility in your life. For example, if you have a lot of peace, a lot of prosperity and a lot of purpose, but don't have peace, maybe your kids are unhappy and the family is going through a tough situation, so you have no mental peace, it still doesn't work. So you need simultaneously a combination of purpose, prosperity and peace to be happy. So that's a framework.
All the three
P's. The other framework that comes to mind is a more recent one. I read the Book of Joy on my wife's advice. It's a dialogue between the Dalai Lama and Bishop Tutu of South Africa. And in that book, they are chasing this question of what is the secret of happiness. And the answer they come back to is that if your life is full of empathy, that you can empathize with other people and their misery and their unhappiness. If you can look at other people's problem as big as yours, that will make you happy.
Very good.
Right? If you can forgive, instead of seeking revenge against people who have done you something wrong, if you can forgive them, it's likely to make you more happy.
Wow.
Which is contradictory to what we think. The third thing is generosity, which means that if you give away things to people that that makes them happy, that will make you happy.
Right.
So other people becoming happy, you being the cause, will make you happy. And the fourth one is gratitude. To know and say that all these things have gone well for me in life. We spend so much time focusing on what has not gone well for us. But apparently I'm assuming that this generosity, gratitude is something even the elderly people would realize is very important, because the more gratitude you have with what has gone well for you, I think the happier you become. So there we have Dalai Lama and Bishop Tutu talking about empathy, forgiveness, generosity and gratitude. So there's another framework. So we have seen two frameworks now quickly.
Right.
The question that we are trying to ask in New North is there a framework here?
Right.
That you can get older
Okay.
while becoming more productive, more happy, more successful. And clearly we see people around us who are doing that. It's not like I'm not talking about something that is extremely rare.
Sure.
We have seen it. So is there a way to do it more proactively? I guess I've talked a lot, but I guess now I'd like to ask you yourself, Vasu, what in this field of what we call the New North problem, the idea of successful longevity, what excites you?
Why am I here? Right?
Why are you
am I
here?
doing this? Right.
Yes.
Great question. Thank you. Okay, I spent significant amount of my life in the space of education and learning. I see that learning unfolds at 3 stages in life. In the first stage, what we can call as the first stage learning, that's where you go to school, you go to college, you go to university. At the end of all of this, you get a certificate, right? This certificate is your license to make a living. So you enter the workforce, you kind of leverage the education that you had, you do great things. In order to do this, we have the entire infrastructure in place. We have schools, colleges, programs, syllabi, classrooms, teachers, all of that, right? We know how to do this for ages. Very well understood problem, right? Then when you enter the workforce, again, you just not only need to survive, but also thrive in your profession. And that's where comes like the second age learning. This is where, whether you call it as executive education or all these L&Ds or the corporate training models that are out there, they kind of help you to kind of do your job well, right? So that is the second age learning. Again, the infrastructure is in place. We know what to do, right? Then what happens? You're done with your job, you are retired, then what, right? You are still in your 60s, you have a lot of energy in you, you don't feel any different after you kind of blow the 65th birthday candle. It's not that next day everything has changed, right? But then you cannot go to work, right? You feel lonely. So, but at the same time, if you can actually uncover a new field where leverage your cognitive, your physical health, and then get on to do new things. Again, let me kind of sidetrack and get you into this. When we place people into 4 kind of categories. So if you think about it, there are 4 kinds of people: young, old, young old, and old. So now he can clearly distinguish the young and then the old. We'll not
very
talk
obvious.
about them, right? So there are old young people who are, they're actually young, but they think like old people. They're not really motivated to do much things, and we see bunch of people. But anyway, that's a different problem. We'll not address it now. But then the interesting category is this young old category. These people are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and maybe even 90s. But then their physical, mental, cognitive abilities are, it's not diminished at all. They are as energetic as they can be. In fact, people half their age are not able to function as these people are functioning, right? We see people around us. Now, can we really look at them, like they are, how they can be so active, energetic and happy? So, can we sort of look at their function, the way that they kind of, go about their life and learn from that? And can we actually create a framework from these learnings? So, that is New North for me. The learning, in one sense, learning is the key for healthy aging. Okay, you have spent a lot of time in second age learning, example, right? What do you think are the learnings from that space that can be applied to third age learning?
Great elaboration, Vasu. I think the framework is fantastic. I stand guilty as charged for having spent too much of my time, last 15 years, on second age learning, working in upskilling and executive education, and helping young people succeed and professionals succeed, right? I think there is a lot of learnings in the space, and we can of course evaluate how much of that translates to third age learning. That remains a matter of discussion. My colleague Ashokan Pichai, who was the Chief Learning Officer at Talent Sprint with me, he and I wrote a paper some time back, actually an article in, I think it was Times of India or something like that, where we try to identify the key principles of how people learn in their second age. Meaning that once somebody is between the age of 25 and 50, they're in the workspace and they're trying to upskill, what are the key principles that matter, that actually make learning effective? So came up with some principles, and I'll try to outline them, just like the framework discussions we've been having. Here is one more framework that I can contribute. The first piece that we thought was important is that people can exit first stage learning, school and college, without learning how to learn. So learning to learn is a very critical pillar, and I suspect this might even translate well to third age learning. Right. So learning to learn, the learnability that you can help people acquire. Meta learning. Given a new problem or a new domain, new space, do you have the tools to go and learn about it quickly without having to go to a classroom? So your self-learning capability, self-learning index, how strong is it or how high is it? So that's one key part. The second thing that we learned is that second age learners, they learn better when they do rather than when they listen to a lecture. So learning by doing or learning by practice is a very important element of second age learning.
Yes.
The third piece is that it turns out the learning is not a solitary activity. We say man is a social animal, or humans are social animals. Learning apparently is a social activity, that when people are with friends, with cohorts, with classrooms, with colleagues, they learn better rather than sitting in a corner and learning by themselves.
That explains the failure of digital learning, for
exactly,
example.
MOOCs, etc. Sitting in a home and self-learning, self-paced is very hard. The fourth pillar, which is not talked about much, but we discovered this through our own experience in the journey of second age learning in Talent Sprint, is that failure, the fear of failure is a big enemy of successful learning. People fail to learn because they're afraid of failure. So if you can take away the fear of failure from learning itself, then learning gets better. So to summarize, second age learning, in our view, rests on 4 pillars. Learning to learn, learning by doing, learning with friends, and learning without the fear of failure.
Fantastic.
If you can create this space which has all these 4 elements, people start to learn very successfully.
Okay.
Now, how much of this will translate to third age learning, I think is a matter of discovery. I mean, that's part of the reason why we are doing New North, I think, is to talk to people to understand what has worked for them, and from there derive, like you said, the world is aging, and aging for good reason, because medical science is getting better, food is getting more nutritious and affordable, all that is great, but we don't want people to age without commensurate productivity and happiness. So if we can figure that out through this series of podcast interviews that come after this in New North, I think that will be a well worth an effort for both of us.
I think, let me, it's very interesting what you said. So you talked about adult learning, right? And what are the major contributors to essential components of adult learning. That's very interesting framework that you talked about, yet another framework. But then look at it this way, is third age learning adult education 2.0, or is there anything beyond that? I think that's an interesting exploration that we can start.
Good question. I can't help remember a story that I still vividly remember from maybe 10 years ago. I was invited to give a talk, inspirational talk apparently, to the board members of a very large bank, which I shall not name for obvious reasons. And the host who invited me was a very senior person in the bank, and they gave me the forum for 90 minutes, and I did try to do some usual, inspirational magic. At the end of it, when it was all done, lots of claps, etc. And the host asked me, like, so Santanu, how was your experience talking to our board members? And these, as you can imagine, are people who are in their 60s, 70s sometimes. Very grey-haired, very wise, etc., etc. So I responded to my host by saying that, when I look at the classroom, half of them seemed very attached and intrigued and inspired and engaged. And the other half seemed completely checked out, like they were waiting for my session to end. And they had the least bit interest in what I had to say. So I mentioned to the host that, a lot of them looked very engaged, but some of them just looked completely checked out. So my host turns to me and says, well, I hope you know this, Santanu, that getting old is mandatory, getting wise is optional.
Wow. Okay.
So that is a joke that I had to bring up at this point because we are talking about third age learning.
Yes, yes.
But again, on a more serious note, let me ask you, Vasu, what is the need and use of third age learning in your opinion?
Okay, the way that I see is a triangle. A triangle where there is a elderly person, and there's a caregiver, and then third one is the society, right? So if you actually look at it, once you are retired, when you go home, and you fall off the cliff immediately, in terms of the 3 P's that you mentioned: purpose, prosperity, and peace, right? So then, it becomes difficult for caregivers to hold you. And at the same time, the society to sort of take the burden of this elderly population, right? So you are looking at an equation, a misery triangle that is lose, lose, lose. In other words, it is not helping anybody, right? How do we transform this triangle of misery to a triangle of happiness? So from lose, lose, lose to how do you make it into a win, 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 happy triangle, right? So that's what the need for, the most important way of articulating the need for third age learning is simply this. So, on one side, if you are a third age learner, if you are an elderly person curious about learning and so on, you are physically active, mentally active, cognitively you are kind of improving your function, and then you delay your physical decline. And not just that, you are also able to kind of generate wealth still, right? So that is one aspect of that. Then the second one is your caregivers are slightly now relaxed. They know that you are on your own, and then you are very active, you are happy, and they are happy, right? The society is also benefiting from you because you have accumulated so much of experience, the wealth of knowledge from all these years, and there is a use to it, right? So this is the kind of happy situation that we should do, unless we create a framework, okay, which will transition the society from this misery triangle to a happy triangle, right? So we're going to see a lot of social issues, okay, and it's going to be worse and worse, right? So that's what
That's very, I think, inspiring. I think I personally feel that, this framing of a lose-lose-lose triangle, the misery triangle as you call it, between, the person is unhappy, therefore their caregivers are unhappy, and in some total society is actually underperforming. It's like everybody is suboptimal. Right. So how do you bring it to optimality? You bring it to a point where the people who are aging are doing well and productive and they're happy. And then the caregivers pressure goes off them, society becomes more productive because this becomes essentially a third workforce that comes into play, right? So that's very good. In fact, that reminds me of a couple of my own inspirations on this space. Those of you who have dealt with the challenge of aging parents, I think a great book that I remember reading is Atul Gawande, the
Being
great
Mortal.
American
Yeah.
Being Mortal. Yeah,
Yes.
so Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. Atul Gawande is a Indian American doctor come writer. Many of his books are very famous. I mean, I remember reading Checklist Manifesto when he first wrote it. Brilliant.
Yes.
So, Being Mortal came out, I think, 5 years ago or 6 years ago, and I think it's a book that really teaches us how to deal with the elderly, and it kind of really clears your mind about how elderly want to be treated. So, I thought that was a very powerful resource that I came across. The other thing that I also particularly have been paying attention to, especially in the light of the evolution of AI, is I think companionship of the elderly is a big problem, and I think globally there is a understanding that loneliness is a major contributor to public health problems worldwide. So the next generation of public health crisis might come with an aging population and loneliness, because I think I'm not sure the stat is exactly right, but apparently 75% of people above 75 live alone. So there's been a company called LEQ, which has been building these social bots, which are companion bots for the elderly. And while it sounds a little scary and usual technological, sort of solution to a human problem, and people kind of worry about these things, but in reality, I think these guys are doing a great job. So I think when I read about such things, I'm a little more hopeful.
Right.
So I guess to you, the question is, Vasu, that what are your views of how this space is going to evolve technologically as an AI researcher in particular?
Right.
Do you see the connection between longevity, AI and happiness, which probably is one of the facets of this particular podcast of ours?
Absolutely. I think I think what you mentioned about LEQ is very interesting, very fascinating. As you said, the loneliness is the biggest battle in the old age, right? So I see a lot of the emotional support that can be provided through artificial intelligence, through robotics, to this kind of population is kind of picking up the steam, right? So that I saw a bunch of companies. For example, I saw in Korea, for example, there are these robotic dolls that are distributed to the elderly population. You can actually adopt a robotic doll as your grandkid. So imagine a grandmother or a grandfather adopting a robotic doll and then living with that doll, right? It again sounds crazy at this point in time, but it may be the new normal in the future, right? But then look at the functionality that is provided with this doll. One is that there is somebody to talk to, whose voice can be sort of tuned to the voice that you like, maybe your granddaughter's voice, or maybe your son's voice, right? Then you're having these conversations. But more importantly, this doll will remind you to take your medicines on time, right? Asking you, how do you feel this morning? So such an emotional connect, right? And also it can have conversations about your early life or major life events and so on, right? So not just that. This is the space of medical technologies that are combined to kind of help emotionally also. So in one sense, you are able to sort of make use of this kind of robotic equipment at home in order to detect fall, for example, right? Or if there is no movement for about 24 hours, they can alert whoever needs to be alerted, right? Things of that kind. I see this space kind of being filled with newer, very innovative ideas, very innovative technologies that are going to help this population. But this is the medical field, right? I wanted to really sort of think about it where you are sort of clubbing learning with this kind of field, right?
Yeah.
EdMed space, if you like.
EdMed. Did you just make that up? No. It's a good one.
I think so. Some people have said it before, right? Yeah. So imagine this same companion, robotic doll, sitting with you, helping you learn, for example, a new topic, right? As an elderly person, you are able to interact with it. It's your cognitive aid.
Yeah.
Right? It is trying to address, say, for example, some kind of issues with your memory. It's helping you constantly to connect with the other concepts that are required while you are exploring the current concept and so on, right? So then, maybe you can call it the third age learning robot
Yeah.
that is sitting with you.
Third age learning aids.
Yes.
I I think hearing aid can exist.
Exactly.
Why not a learning aid?
Yes,
at
absolutely.
that age, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
These are the new things that are coming up, I believe,
Yeah.
which will make a huge difference for us.
Excellent.
Tell me, what is your expectation from this whole exercise that we are doing in terms of New North?
I think, Vasu, as we've been discussing, I think part of the reason we are doing this is that it's a sense of adventure. And sometimes when you go on a big, trekking expedition, you kind of know what you're going to do, but you don't really know exactly what will happen along the way. And that is the reason you're going in the first place, for that element of surprise. I think in the case of New North, as we have been discussing, as we intend to interview some very interesting people, highly accomplished sometimes, or people we don't even know, but they're doing amazing things. So as we talk to them, these are people who we think are aging with success, aging gracefully, physically, mentally, perhaps even, relationship-wise, spiritually.
We call them super agers.
Super agers, people aging in a way that they're the envy of others. And we want to learn from them, right? We want to reverse engineer the secret of their success and package it back through some frameworks for others to learn from. And that's where third age learning is implementing the output of this learning, right? So in many ways, I think this is an adventure of meeting interesting people, and I, both of us obviously believe that those who are listening are going to come along for this journey, because I'm sure this is a matter of interest to a lot of people in this particular age group, especially as you turn 50, and as you described, they're turning into, sort of as you retire, you can almost see the purpose leg falling off abruptly.
Yes.
Or the feeling of prosperity going away, which may be not even real but imaginary. That's like falling away. So people are uncertain and they're concerned. So this is a therapy for that,
right?
In some sense, this whole podcast of New North. So my expectation is to learn, and then hopefully we can all work to put it back together into practice. Theory and practice can go hand in hand, which is nice. I have personally seen examples of super agers who, when I try to understand what makes them such a grand success in their lives, something very simple pops up. Like I know someone who I think is highly successful in aging well because they have very little expectations from others.
Wow.
Right? I mean, imagine the time that, elderly people expect so much from their children or grandchildren. It doesn't happen.
Yes.
But if you can switch off the expectation button from the, from yourself,
I'm
then
sure
maybe
that's pretty hard, Santanu.
I know it's hard, but I'm saying that that's the intent, right? I mean, at least we should know what works.
Yes.
I mean, we also know empathy is difficult, forgiveness is very difficult, but we know that these things will make you happy,
right?
Dalai Lama, Bishop Tutu style. So in that way, I think we should discover some insights. Yes. I think the search for insights is the real purpose of this podcast.
I cannot agree more with what you just said.
Yeah. And what would you think is the journey ahead, and what do you think is your view of what we should make out of this?
My friend, what's important? Is it the destination or the journey? It's actually the company that takes you to the destination. Yeah. So that's what makes the journey interesting, right?
There's a very similar quote about, or saying about eating. Since we started with gastronomy, maybe this is something I should add towards the end. That it's not what you eat, it's not where you eat, it's whom you eat. That makes all the difference.
Fantastic. Yeah. Okay. I mean, let's keep that aside now.
But yeah, this podcast is going to make us hungry.
Yes. Yes. So, to me, on a more serious note, this whole exercise of studying people, gathering insights, and then sort of, coming up with the empirical framework that will help us understand this as a science, a new science. If it is science, then it is the greatest advantage of science is it is falsifiable. So hence we'll able to build new insights, new techniques, new technologies, new products and services. Right? But if you don't understand the problem at the depth that it deserves, and if you don't respect the problem that it deserves, then we are building something that is going to be very short term and useless. So this is, to me, it is the problem of understanding the human mind as it is aging. To me, it is understanding the emotion, or it's understanding the capabilities of humanity as such. Okay, it is pushing the limits of one's capabilities. So unless we get, unless we deep dive into the problem, we're going to come up with very surface level problem. If you do the surface level treatment, we will find solutions are also at the surface level and very temporary. This exercise, to me, Santanu, is very, very important. Understanding how the super aging happens, take those insights and then build an empirical framework. Look at it with scientific lens. Use cognitive science, use learning sciences, use biology. Do whatever it takes, but build a solid foundation, very strong conviction that we will be able to sort of create a new world where the happy longevity is a reality.
So to make happy longevity the new normal, there you have it. We are building a podcast that will cover the science and art of longevity.
Sure.
And it will come with facts, figures, data, theories, frameworks, and hopefully a lot of wonderful stories of real people doing real things in their lives, which all of us can learn from. Thank you.
Thank you.